teachers at Reddit, what is something a student of yours has said that made you think wow, there is no hope left for you? Kid, totally serious, I'm going to drop out. I'll make money off of YouTube. Me, how many views are your videos getting? Kid, I have 4 subscribers. So I just need a few more. I want to be a drug dealer, but the cool kind. You know, the ones that wear a suit and carry a briefcase. He was 17 at the time and completely serious. He was expelled a month later for jumping another student. My wife told me this story about a time she was lecturing a kid on why he should try to do well in school. She asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up. His response, I want to be in jail. That's where my dad and uncle is. She had no response. Probably the only time in her career that she was left speechless by a student. On Friday, a girl told me that she and her mother were walking down the street behind an old man. The old man reached into his pocket for something and all his money fell onto the sidewalk. She and her mother ran and picked it all up. When the old man tried to take it back from them, they told him it was their money and to go to hell. I had a senior say she didn't think it was fair. I've grown to hate that word BTW, that my exams used short answer questions instead of multiple choice. She said some of us just aren't good writers. I responded that if you're a senior in college and can't string a few sentences together, something has gone wrong. She stormed out of class. I'm a 2nd grade teacher. I have a boy who lies constantly about anything. He was on camera watching the footage of himself punching a student in the face and he crossed his arms and said, if I didn't do it then I didn't do it. The worst part is his mom believes every word he says and attacks the school for making him accountable for his actions. He's going to do something as an adult and go to jail. When they pull him away, I know he's going to be yelling, if I didn't do it, I didn't do it. I had one student at a bilingual school in Mexico, who after being at this school and supposedly learning English for 5+ years, still couldn't speak it and barely tried to make any effort to learn anything. Didn't do assignments and failed almost every test. When we mentioned it to her parents, their attitude was that she doesn't really need it because she will just marry someone who will take care of everything for her. My thought was, who would want to marry someone who doesn't know anything and makes no effort? I teach English in Japan and sometimes here. I don't understand this because I am Japanese. A girl, 8th grade, told me she wanted to have kids, 2-3, by the time she was 18 so she could have the energy to keep up with them and then be a stripper to support them. I am a teacher, but the quote is from my sister. I don't need to go to college, because it's easier to see God when you're in the gutter. 5 years later she's in a trailer with her abusive fiance. I had a student say, I don't need to learn any of this. I won't use it in real life. When I tried to explain why math was going to be useful, he responded, you're a dumbass. Watch me get rich without even going to school. I mean, sure, it's been done, but probably not the best idea. Incident number 1. Can we just not learn this? It's hard. We should just skip it. Incident number 2. I don't have to get good grades. My grandfather owns a house and when he dies, my family is going to sell it for $1 million. So I won't have to ever get a job. I had a student who was always acting up. I constantly tried talking to him about his behavior, and I wrote plenty of referrals. Throughout all of this I would email and call his mother, but never got a response. One day he was pacing around and texting someone. I told him to put his phone away and he said, I can't. I'm not too happy right now. So I said, will you take it out to the hall and I'll give you 1 minute? His response really shook me. He said, no, I'll sit down. I just want my mom to turn the water back on. When all you know about a student is what you see in the classroom, it can be easy to forget they may not have a great home life. So I did wonder, is there hope for him? But it also wasn't truly any fault of his own. He just had a at-home life where he was stricken by poverty. I work at an alternative school for kids kicked out of public school for severe emotional and behavioral issues. A lot of them are going to require government services for the rest of their lives. There's usually not just one thing they say, but we know that they will never have normal lives. It's a little disheartening to hear a 6-year-old scream that he's going to duck and kill you, especially when you were playing tag not 5 minutes before. There's a young boy who can be very sweet and is an adorable blonde butterball. However, he has pretty severe behaviors and gets restrained at some point on a daily basis. I saw his parents one day because they live in government subsidized housing close by and walk him to school. It was 50 degrees out and the little boy was in a basketball jersey and shorts. His parents looked exactly how I expected them to look and were rude to all the staff they interacted with. It just showed me that no matter how much we do, he spends most of his life with his itty parents. Edit. Having a child with behaviors doesn't inherently make someone a bad parent. But in our program specifically, most of the students come from harsh backgrounds which either causes or exacerbates their behavior. While trying to help them, like seriously going out of my way, shut up. Principal at an inner city high school. I had to sit down with a student who had been caught plagiarizing for a second time. This time, from The Onion. I teach first year US law students. More than you would care to believe. They don't know America has 3 branches of government, much less what the branches do. I asked my students what they could have done to better prepare themselves for their exam. One responded with, "You should have told me to revise better. The revision sheets and this is really important wasn't enough apparently." University professor here. A student last term never purchased the textbook, and thus never did his homework. Sat in the back and spaced out all class. Failed one exam, and barely passed the other. He came to me during the final week of class to ask me if he could do all of his missed assignments and then asked why I didn't remind him to do them. Bro, this is university. I'm not chasing after you. I had a first grader throw chairs and desks at me for about a week, after 2 months of horrific behavior that the parents and administration ignored. One hard enough to injure my knee. Before I finally had enough video evidence for the principal to get involved. The student refused to speak to me at all. Eventually my co-teaching partner got him to explain why he was doing it. I just don't like him. I feel bad for the kid. He has serious emotional problems. I don't know if I'd say there is no hope left, because first graders pretty young to write someone off. I hope he gets treatment. I had one 4-year-old who couldn't hold a pencil. He couldn't remember how to pick it up, and didn't have the strength to push it down hard enough on the paper to get any leverage. He couldn't color, had no motor skills whatsoever. He didn't have a dominant hand. His parents liked to leave him at my learning center for an hour, even though he couldn't use the bathroom on his own. He was 4 years old and didn't have the slightest grasp of the alphabet, and couldn't retain anything we taught him. It took a month to get him to count to 10. My theory on all this is, on top of a learning disability developmental delay his mom was in denial of. He was a natural lefty who was forced to use his right hand but, because of the disability, couldn't, and ended up not developing any motor skills in either hand. Poor kid. Paris isn't in France. That was like 9 years ago and I haven't forgotten it. I used to teach science in a public high school. Had to convince a sophomore that trees came from seeds. Blew his mind. I once had a student who didn't know what the answer to 5-year grave 5 was. This was in the preparatory year of a private medical university. Fear for the patients if he ever graduates. Gave students a project to create and promote an invention to help the world. Let's see what they could come up with. Kid comes up and presents his product. The foot pedal powered wheelchair. Not a teacher but worked at a school for a while. Had a 4th grader say that he didn't need school because he was going to have a wife and she would do everything. Same student while disrupting the entire class also said, "What are you going to do? I know you can't hit me." High school teacher here. Dude, if you don't start coming to class and doing the work, you'll fail out of school. School's done nothing for me. I'm gonna rap to pay the bills. Bro. Kid was an awful musician. Couldn't make a beat. Couldn't write a rhyme to save his life. I didn't teach, but I tutored mentored for a few years. Heard one student say she didn't care about school. Didn't want to go to college because she will just go on welfare. One 6th grader was expelled for behavior. Constantly was kicked out of class. Fought dress code violations, including wearing gang colors. Expelled at 13. Couldn't multiply. Could barely read. can't remember one specific thing he said to make me think he had no hope, but it was pretty depressing. When is the teacher coming? This wasn't the first lesson I had with this child. While teaching about a particular historical figure, I try to wake this kid up. Did he sell drugs? Common no. Then I don't give a shit. I teach high school math geometry. One of my students said, why do we even need math? All I care about is money. His classmates proceeded to laugh. Spent 15 minutes on a math lesson. Do examples. Hand out worksheet. Do one on the worksheet with them. He asked, so you just want us to fill this in with random numbers? Speechless. Not a teacher but a kid in my class tried to explain to the teacher that he doesn't care about school because he'll just live on his parents' money and told her that he can buy her because she's a poor ass. It's not what they said, it's what they didn't say. I asked him to read out loud and he just stared at the paper. I soon found out that he read at a kinda level as a 5th grader. Didn't want to put in the work himself. Instead just waited for someone to read it for him. His comprehension was there but he wanted everything spoon-fed to him. Not a teacher but my wife had a student in 3rd grade who refused to do any writing assignments. My wife told him that she was going to call his parents to explain to them what was going on if he didn't start doing his work. He said, I don't care. My mom said I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Rules don't apply to me. My wife called his mom and his mom told my wife that she, meaning my wife, just has to understand how her son is and if he doesn't want to do the work, then he doesn't have to. His behaviors all made sense after that and it was a very tough year. He stopped doing all work and started harassing other kids, probably partially due to boredom since he was doing nothing else by the end of the year. As long as he was happy, my wife couldn't get the mom on board. After months of learning about maps and cardinal directions in our grade 9 geography class, is north always the way you are facing? There is no helping you, kid. Edit. I am not at a school at the South Pole. Two contenders here. 17-year-old girl who saw birds walking around outside her classroom and said, look, that bird has feet. And so does that one. Also the 14-year-old boy who asked me whether I'd ever noticed that Dwayne Johnson and The Rock looked really similar. Okay, I need you guys to name some countries for me. Let's make a list. I get a few examples and then Africa. I proceed to explain the concept of a continent. So wait, Africa is a country inside of a country? Like Tasmania is a country but it's in Australia? Please keep in mind that this was a year 11 high school class. Had my year 2 private student try to overturn his study table on me. Didn't work. I slammed it down and scream at me to write out his homework because that's what his mum pays me for. There's still hope. But it made me so sad and angry as soon as he assumed I was of a lesser position than him just because I was being paid. Like yeah nah bye. I teach lots of 7-9-year-olds and quite often ask them to spell their names for me just so I get it correct for them. Rachel or Rachel etc. But you wouldn't believe just how many of these children don't have a clue. I appreciate some may be dyslexic and that so I don't expect all of them to know but just more surprised at such a high percentage. Edit. I'm only talking about their first names and the ones that have trouble tend to have simpler names. Just this week, I have a student in grade 5 that is pretty oppositional. Has a tough home life. etc. He doesn't always try very hard. But sometimes I can see he's trying to put in some effort. We were talking about how I grade them, and he interrupts the conversation with, I don't care at all about my grades. And I thought here we go. Another rant about how unfair school is. I just want to know that I keep getting better. Perfect. I got chills. Edit. Okay. I see now that I completely misread that question. I've got a class of 8th grade students and we just got a new student. In his first week, he proceeded to grab a female student's butt with both hands. I call him up to my desk and ask him if he knows what unwanted touching and sexual assault mean. Without emotion he says that yes he does but he's new so he needs to make a name for himself. I immediately sent him to the office. The saddest part about this is that the response I got from administration is that the student was spoken to about the situation and I need to make sure they do not sit near each other. No consequence for sexual assault equals you can be assured that something like this will happen again. I'm a high school earth science teacher. 11th grader says, wait, we don't live inside the earth. I'm reading all of these stories and thinking to myself, gee, a lot if not most of these people have driver's licenses. This is probably going to be buried, but I like to reference this one from time to time. I had a student who was a hoarder. He was one of those kids that we all remember who had the backpack that was filled with everything for every class. It looked like this kid carried around a small grocery cart on his back. One day, I'm walking him to his locker to look for an assignment that I knew that I had given him before, and I smell this nasty smell. Big surprise, it's his locker. Open it to find 89 cartons of chocolate milk stacked inside. That's not all on the floor. He had a pretty large mason jar filled with what looked like dead bugs. I asked him why he had so much milk in his locker and he said stone face to dip the bugs in. Never sure what happened to this kid when he left, but that was the most disturbing for me.